Welcome to the show, everyone. Really appreciate everyone today. We have a very special guest today, Amy Travis, and she's an author, and she has so many different things that she's doing. And we like to welcome her in now. Amy, welcome to the Kilroy Williams Show. And if you could just start off by introducing yourself and tell us. I see you have a web page with all your books and all the stuff that you're doing to help people. So, tell us all about yourself and what's going on in your mind today.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here. So,
Glad to have you.
I have written several books, and if I can just give you some background on how I got to this point. So, right out of high school, I did the college thing like everybody does, most people do, and I went to Wheaton College and I was studying to be a biblical studies major. But then, of course, life happens. So, I met my husband. Actually, right before I left for college. So I went to Chicago from Pittsburgh, met him before I left. So that only worked for about a year and a half. I came home, I married Perry, and then started having children. So I had put my education on hold. But then about 10 years or so ago, I went back to college. I was on the I was on the 20-year plan. You know, that works
Oh, yeah.
sometimes. So, and I went to Liberty University, and I had taken some classes in biblical worldview, and I was really just hooked. So even after I finished that program, I went on. I was able to get a master's in business, but then I kind of stuck with the idea of the biblical worldview. So back in 2014, I started a Bible study just at our church, and I called it Fusion because it was the idea of connecting the ultimate reality with our current reality. So, the
Mm.
ultimate reality, of course, is Jesus. And so, how does that relate and how does that spill over into real life? And I think sometimes as believers, we struggle with that.
Yeah.
We kind of have the church bubble, and, we can all do that very well. But soon as we leave church and we go to Starbucks, we, mouth off to the barista or give the waitress a hard time. It sometimes doesn't trickle down into our belief system, how we deal with people. It doesn't always trickle down into our political views, which what I've learned most recently is the amazing connection between the biblical worldview and truth and a lot of the current hot topics that we're seeing. And so I'm sure we'll get into that a little more. But
Yeah.
my husband and I, we have three adult children. So from the ages of 29 to 19.
Wow.
So we're in a new phase of life. And so that's why I've enjoyed writing books. And uh, we've also done most recently. So Fusion, if I could just back up for a second,
Mm.
uh, there were some things that happened and we weren't able to continue at the church, so we took a break there. And after a couple of years, we actually reorganized it as a nonprofit. So that started out with just making a way to do some leadership training for women in our area. And what it morphed into is actually incredible. What the Lord has led us into. And in 2018, my mom, my daughter, and I, so the three of us started Fusion Leadership Group, had an opportunity to visit Uganda in East Africa. And, excuse me, we had a friend that had come to the States for college. And when she returned home, she actually started working in government. She's very successful, has done very well, and had invited us over. So we went there as their guests. But the other thing that happened was my daughter's church was sponsoring children from an orphanage school in Uganda. And so when Val, uh, my daughter, realized that we were going to the same country, she arranged for us to visit the orphanage also, which was 5 hours from where we were staying. And, that's 5 hours in the developing country is not the same as driving from Pittsburgh to Philadelphia.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
So it was
Definitely.
amazing we got there, but that was God ordained. And the directors there, Millie and Robert Kikamiko, they're a young couple, remarkably young, like 28 and 33 or 34. I forget how old Robert is. And they're running a school for 500 children. They have a foundation which also helps young women in, we're talking abject poverty. And one of the things that we're dealing with now is that, uh, I mean, it's been going on, but that we are helping Millie to address, because she's been in this fight for a while, is that sometimes fathers will sell their children, their
Mm,
daughters, once they turn the age of 13. So uh, we are helping right now to get these girls into secondary school. Like there's no given, there's no government education like we have here, and even
hmm.
with all of its ills that we're seeing right now, uh, it's still better than nothing, and no education. So a lot of work to be done there, but Fusion Leadership Group helps to fund some projects there and to support Millie and Robert, and so that's
Wow, that's
about it. That's
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 where
that's a
we're at.
fantastic mission.
Thank
It's
you.
so the fathers you say sell their daughters. Is that like for sex trafficking stuff or
Yeah,
uh,
well, yeah. So there's
mm,
a couple different ways it can go. It's considered child brides, and that's a practice we see in a lot of
mm-hmm,
underdeveloped countries. And I actually have a video on the Fusion website. So it's fusionleadership.site, where I interview Millie, and she talks about the root causes of this. And really, what it boils down to is that, believe it or not, Uganda has only outlawed polygamy in the last 30 years.
mm,
So what that means is it still happens, and it's not just there. In a lot of places, it still happens in the rural areas. So now these fathers have five, two, three, maybe not five, but two or three wives, multiple children. They can't afford to support or educate all their children. So the boys are the most valuable, as they view it. And so once a girl turns 13, she's really expendable. She
mm-hmm,
is uh, considered property, and she can be sold. And a lot of times they hope to get a husband for her that will help to support the family. And we're talking object poverty. I don't think, for the majority of us, if we haven't been to a developing country, it's really hard to picture and understand. But
mm-hmm.
unfortunately, it's real.
It's real in our own country. You,
It
you hear
is.
about that. Yeah. Are
Yes.
you are you involved in any way helping our own country as well, or do you just mainly focus out
Yes,
there?
no, absolutely, absolutely. I'm glad you said that. And I know we do get some criticism for that, because people say, "Oh, well, there's a lot of needs
Right.
here," and absolutely there are. And one of the ministries that we're supporting is our friends, pastors Jay and Tiffany Gilbert, started a pregnancy care center in the city of Pittsburgh. And so that is something that we are involved in. That's fairly new, and we're looking for new ways to, or I should say, additional ways to support them. We're very small ourselves, so limited
Sure.
resources, but we do that. And we've also supported different food banks. And I have a whole network of nonprofits that we're connected with here. So, Inspired Women, for example, is a network that my friend Deborah put together that helps individuals who have nonprofits support other women who have nonprofits. So they're both local and international.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Wow. Because our children are not safe today. They're not safe.
they're
You know,
not.
it's
They're
it's a
not.
it's a very sad thing. Well, that's a great thing that you're doing. And what has your response been so far with that? With people since you've been doing it? You've been like really great success, or what have you seen?
Yes. So when we started the leadership uh, conferences, we started those in 2018. So we basically went from the three of us, so that it wasn't through another organization. So we were up to 100 women that are attending these events. Unfortunately, like the rest of the world, uh, we've kind of been on having to rebuild since
Sure,
we had
sure.
our last conference in February of 2020, the first second week of February, and I was uh, planning to attend a conference 3 weeks later at the same exact venue, and of course, that never happened. So we're starting to pick that back up again as far as the leadership conferences. So those are very well received, and we focus on training women in the Pittsburgh area. We bring in speakers, and a lot of it's about helping. So taking someone who has a message but doesn't necessarily have a platform in the way that we do. So we find these women and I train them. I show them a way to present their story. We call them Fusion 15s.
Wow.
So we incorporate 7 or 8 speakers for one conference by limiting the time. And my mom is always a speaker at these events. She loves this.
Oh, that's awesome.
So Connie, so that's a big reason why we do these conferences, and that has been really amazing, and we love those, and it's kind of been sad having to downscale, but we have to keep
Hmm.
innovating and finding new ways
You'll
to
get
do
back there.
that.
You'll get back there.
We
No,
will.
no doubt.
Yeah, we're,
So
we're
what
moving
what
on.
what brought you on to do this? Did you feel a calling from the Lord, or did you what was in your heart that wanted you to do this?
Yes, absolutely. So when I had started with the whole idea of researching the biblical worldview, so that was something I felt that God had given me, and I had continued to research and study that. And so when we started with the Bible study, I had no intention of getting into nonprofit. I didn't know anything about nonprofits. That's something we had to research and get there. And then the whole overseas Uganda thing really, we would say fell in our laps, but we know that
Mm,
God ordained that. And
sure.
when we look back at all of the very fragile connections and things that could have gone wrong, that could have prevented us from even getting there, we know that God had purposed that. And so, yes, I really focus on my relationship with Jesus Christ. And uh,
Amen.
now I'm starting to focus more on the idea that, and I listened to your podcast, your most recent one, and talking about the end times. And,
Hmm.
I've been studying up on a lot of biblical
Hmm.
prophecy, end time prophecy, and the fact that the times are close. We
Oh
are,
yeah,
we are
yeah,
at the latter part of the end.
yeah.
And so, what I feel just went through a time of prayer and fasting at the beginning of the year. And uh, what I felt the Lord spoke to me was I had started another book project and I just kind of, put it to the side. But I am working on it's going to be more like a booklet called Would God Really Send People to Hell?
Mm,
So it's going to be a tool that hopefully can be used by people who are unchurched
hmm.
and, maybe don't. We've also developed this, what I call Christianese, that we use that people outside of our realm, it doesn't speak to them.
Hmm.
So I use anecdotal stories to try to address some of the common misconceptions. Like one
Hmm.
is when people say, I would rather party in hell with my friends
Mm.
than go to
They have
heaven. So
they have no idea what they're saying.
they have no idea. And
No
so
idea. Yeah.
that's why, I use stories and things relevant to today to explain that contrary to the movie that came out a couple of years ago, there is no beer in heaven. It's actually a place of burning sulfur and, uh, weeping and gnashing of teeth and fire. And I, like many of us, I'm sure, I know you're there as well. That now that we're in the end times, man, it's I'm
Hmm.
going to do
Hmm.
everything I can to get that message out.
Yeah, and you hear everyone's different opinions and their thoughts about the end time. They think it's going to happen this way, that way. We don't really know. We only know what God says is going to happen. You just go by the signs like you go by the seasons. I mean, some people think that, well, this is the end of America. Well, maybe, or maybe God can turn things around. We don't,
Right.
I don't know, but the signs are there that it's definitely we're in the end times. There's no doubt about it. But I think
Absolutely.
God is exposing a lot of the evil that we see, and the enemy Satan and his little minions are panicking. You can see it; they're panicking. They know
Exactly.
that they know that their time is up. You know, and unfortunately, our evil government's part of that. But I think God is going to take care of that. In the end, we win. We know the end of the story. But in the end, we
Absolutely.
win, especially if you're saved. So, and I think during this time, it's really important, as I said personally myself, to reach out to people like you just said that the unchurched, because they're the ones that are going to be suffering. They're the ones that are going to be. Think about someone that you really love dearly, and they're unsaved. And let's say the rapture takes place. Now, we're going to be gone. We're not probably not going to be thinking about that, but just think about that though. They're going to be left here. They're going to be left here going through that terrible things that are going to happen, and that I don't want to see that happen. But you know, but all you can do is do your part, plant the seed, and like you're doing. It is that's do what God's calling is. He calls us all to do something. Um, we each have a different gift, and you have multi gifts here.
Thank you.
What you told me before we got on? What did you say that you kind of want to break down and get into more? You said
Yes, the
let
natural order.
yeah. Go ahead. Let's talk about
Okay,
that.
great. And so this is something I cover extensively in my books, and the reason why is I think it relates to a lot of what's happening right now. So what we're seeing in our society, and Kilroy, I think you and I are both from the generation before the participation trophies, right?
Hmm.
So
Oh yeah,
before, you know,
absolutely.
so
Oh,
before we had this idea that we had to include everybody and we can't hurt anybody's feelings, and all truth is the same, and it's not. And so I like to talk about the natural order. So when you look at, for example, the first three chapters in the book of Genesis cover a lot of the natural order, the idea that God created the universe with the spoken word, the fact that he created us male and female, the fact that he ordained marriage between a man and a woman, and the fact that he gave us the command to multiply and be fruitful, and the idea in that there is good and evil, and that is a constant battle, and
mhm.
we are standing in the middle of the battlefield. And then also, if you look at the uh, the Ten Commandments, the idea of do not kill, do not steal, do not covet your neighbor's spouse, those type of things. So that is a natural order. And so what we're seeing now is everything is attacking, uh, is anti-God, really. And so at the root of it, it's like
Antichrist, totally.
exactly. And like my husband explains, it's like the mob standing outside of the palace when Jesus was on trial, and they said, "We will not have this man rule over us."
Mhm.
So that's what we're seeing in our society, is an attack on every single institution and on the natural order itself. So when we look at the idea of transgenderism, when we look at, all kind of different things that we could discuss, but what I realized as I really prayed about this, and when I think that God revealed to me, and I've heard other teaching on this, is that anytime, or if I could back up for a second, the natural order is created for our protection. So if you think about it, the family unit, God could have chosen to fill the earth any way he wanted to, but he used families. And so we shouldn't be surprised when the family structure, the traditional family structure, is under attack, because that's how we are safe. That is how God protects us.
And then that's how the
And
enemy attacked. That's how the enemy did it.
absolutely, the enemy
Yeah.
wants nothing more than to break that down.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, I have some research in there that shows the amazing benefits to every family member inside a marriage and a family unit. For example, and you may know this, you may have heard this study, but they did a study of I forget, like 2,000 men, that showed that a married man with heart disease, excuse me, lives up to 2 months longer than an unmarried man with no pre-existing conditions.
Wow.
So what they've taken from that is the idea that marriage, and they said even if it's not a great relationship, even if it's not overly fulfilling, there's something about marriage that is a protective factor. And one of the most amazing parts of that study, or I'm sorry, it was probably a different study, there is a correlation, a very strong correlation between marriage and the ability to generate wealth. And that's amazing if you think about it. If you ask my husband, he'd probably tell you that's not true, because us women tend to spend all the money. But the idea is that, and what they've shown is that married people do better financially, live healthier lives, live longer lives, are more generous, volunteer more often than unmarried people. And
That makes sense.
it's just amazing. So that's part of the natural order. And one of the things too, I think it's important for us to realize is that, and like I touched on earlier, in this in the trophy generation and the
Yeah.
trophy, we
Everyone
deserve
wins.
everything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And we don't want to exclude everybody or anybody. We have to realize that when God says no, don't do this, he's not saying, I'll hate you if you do it. What he's saying is, don't do it. This will hurt you.
And there's consequences.
There's consequences.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And another very important topic, and I don't hear a lot of people talking about this, is if you think about it, anytime the natural order is usurped, okay, anytime there's an attempt to go around what God has instituted and what he developed at creation, it provides the perfect cover for the stronger to exploit the weak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I could give you an example, so if we look at the whole transgender phenomenon that's going on and is being pushed relentlessly, and I want you to think about who that is benefiting. Okay, so transgenderism. So is it really benefiting the 13-year-old girl who is going through some insecurities and some body changes, and she enjoys being with her friends more than boys, and she's very athletic, and so she's being told that she's really a boy and that she needs to be brave and come out and do this? Or is it really benefiting the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors who are financially benefiting from these experimental surgeries? So
Yeah.
that's an example of the weak being exploited. And it happens, we see it all throughout our society today. Every time that God's order, his natural order, is circumvented, it's a chance for somebody to be exploited. And that's why the natural order is so important.
Yeah.
And it's for our good, it's for our protection. And when you think about it, he is a creator of the universe. And like I say in my book, his game, his rules.
Yep. Yep. And of course, Satan doesn't like that, at all.
Correct.
He doesn't like that at all. You know, when you were saying about the transgender thing, I knew of someone who had a foster child, and the foster child's about 9, 10 years old, female, and suddenly said that she doesn't feel like she's a female anymore.
Mm,
And, now she's a male, and the parents embraced it. They thought it was wonderful, and it's just,
mm,
it's like, one, that child is too young to even know what they're even talking about, in my opinion.
right.
And to have the family embrace that is just, it nauseates me. I don't understand it. And obviously they're not the judge or anything, but I don't think they're a saved family, Christian family, to
Mhm.
even want to even support that. But yeah, that is going on. And that is part of Satan's way of breaking up the family. If you break up the family, which he has been very successful doing, mother against mother, father against son. It's all in the end times. It's all in the end times where this is happening, and we see it happening. That again is another sign. Is about that.
Yes,
But
absolutely. And part of the lie of transgenderism is the idea, and this is what Satan does. He comes in and he promises, makes these promises that, you are going to be freed from this body that you're in because that's not really you, and you are going to be
mm-hmm,
able to take on this new sexual identity. Uh, but sexuality, even though it has been exploited and there's a lot of downside to it. That is one of God's greatest gifts
mm-hmm,
to
mm-hmm,
us is human sexuality. So what's happening with the transgenderism is that uh, these people are being sold a lie that they can really be another sex. And what happens is they end up becoming sexless.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So they, and
And the schools,
sexually dead.
yeah, and the schools support this. The schools teach this. It's okay. The government schools are teaching this to our children, whether the parents like it or not. It's just unreal. It really is. It really is.
It
It
is.
is. Did you have any more details about about this that you wanted to talk that we could
Yeah,
learn or
sure. You know what? So I have a story in my book when we're talking about the transgender thing. So
yeah.
our youngest, Nick, just a quick story about him. So when he was in eighth grade, and him and his buddies, I think he was in track, and there was a girl there, with pink hair, and they got
Mm-hmm.
into a little bit of a dispute. Well, he said no. He said there's only two genders, and she's like, no, there's not. Well,
Mm-hmm.
she reported him to the principal.
Mm.
And so he gets called down to the office. He really doesn't know exactly what he did wrong. I mean, teenage boys are usually something.
Sure,
I had two
sure.
of them, it's usually something they did. But
Right.
uh, so the assistant principal said to him, Nick, you're in trouble because you said that there are only two genders, and our government just came out saying that there are 58 different genders. And so this was during the Obama years when
Mm.
they did, the whole, uh, I forget the name of the legislation off the top
Mm-hmm.
of my head, but
That's when they started allowing boys to go in girls' bathrooms and so forth. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
exactly. And and Nick, this is personality. He said, nope. He said, there's only two genders. He said, you can't convince me otherwise.
Right.
And
Good for him.
she threatened she was going to suspend him. And
Uh,
she didn't, which is good. He handled it. I would have had to get involved in that point. Could you imagine?
absolutely. Yeah. Fight for that. Yeah.
Right. But yeah. So
Mm.
that was
That's
that.
the sad thing is it's not surprising. Yeah,
No, it's
that's the
not.
sad thing.
It's
It's not
not.
surprising
Yeah.
now. Oh
And
man.
if I could give you another example, when we talk about the natural order, and so
Yeah.
this is an area that we don't typically think of as being part of the natural order, but do you realize that capitalism is evident if you go back in the first few chapters of Genesis. That's what we see. That is God's natural order. Now, it's been called a lot of different things. Obviously, that was not
Mm-hmm.
the title or what they knew it by. But when Moses was involved in establishing the new nation of Israel, and he was given the 10 Commandments, one of them was do not steal. Well, you can't steal something if you don't have ownership of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, you know, the natural order is, as far as, you know, you talk about capitalism versus socialism, the other thing about socialism is that it really goes against human nature in every respect. So
Mm-hmm.
it is not natural to work really hard and to have your possessions taken from you. And, you know, something else I learned about socialism. So I've heard a lot of people say recently that, oh, they're just not doing it right if you do it right. Well, let me tell you something. And what I've learned is, and when you look at history, and I have a whole chapter in my book, The Pursuit of Liberty, on socialism, is that it's always done right because there's one intention for socialism. So socialism is never about helping the individual. It's always about empowering the government.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you can call it whatever you want, but at the end of the day, that's what it is. And there's a story in
Name
the
a country that has been successful. I don't think so.
no, never
Yeah.
been. And I give a lot of examples
Yeah.
of the failures and the tragic results. And capitalism, and you know, Robert Kennedy or JFK, not Robert, in 1963 gave the famous speech where he talked about how a rising tide lifts all boats. And so that's why capitalism is really, like I said, it's a natural order. It's what God created for us to be
Mm-hmm.
able to build wealth. And
Mm-hmm.
are there abuses of it? Of course there are.
Oh,
But it's been proven that across the world that there is no other system that generates more wealth at every single economic level than does capitalism.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think socialism, that's Satan's way. That's his government, as far as I'm
Yep.
concerned.
Yes,
You know,
I
because
agree.
you're all in this, you know, you're a slave. You're a slave by that, you know, and it's just,
Right.
that's just, that's a battle that we've been fighting for a long time. And, you know,
It
it's
is.
been going
It
on for a long
is.
time.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
when you look at the natural order too, and the idea that God, as the creator of the universe, you know, he could have made us slaves
mm-hmm.
if you think about it.
Sure.
Uh, you know, he didn't have to give us the ability to be able
Free will.
to,
Yeah.
yes, he didn't have to give us free will, but he didn't have to give us the ability to prosper either, and to build wealth and to uh, build an identity and security. And he did. And so anytime if you want to know how to do that properly, you have to go to the word of God. And anytime we try to do it, a principle that violates the biblical worldview, you know, that's when we end up with chaos.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you think that we are, in your opinion, I have my opinion. Do you think that we're living in the times of Noah?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
That's what
we're
I think
in
too.
the second half, we're in the later part of the last days.
Mm-hmm.
And and I think you had alluded to this earlier, you know, the parable of the fig tree. And I
Mm-hmm.
hear a lot of pastors say, oh, well, we don't know exactly, you know, when the end is coming or how it's going to come, and we don't really need to worry about that. But if you look at the parable of the fig tree, Jesus really chastised and called out the spiritual leaders and said, you know, you can predict the weather, but you can't read the signs of the times.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
that is one of our responsibilities as believers, is to know the signs of the times. And you know what? If Jesus didn't want us to know when he was coming back, he wouldn't have told us, but he
Right.
did.
Right.
He laid it out very
Says, yeah,
specifically.
that's right. That's right.
And And if you look at it, as far as end time prophecy, everything points to Israel. And so that's why we have to keep an eye on
Mm-hmm.
what's happening there. And even as far as, being the latter half of the end times, are you familiar with the prophecy when it talks about when my people were regathered?
Mm-hmm.
So many believe that the last generation, and what Jesus talked about in one of his parables about, they will not see death before I return, that's referring to the generation that was born after 1948, when Israel claimed its independence as a nation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if you look at scripture too, and it says that the times of that generation, I'm sorry, is defined as 70 years. So as my pastor has pointed out, we are in overtime. So if
Good
you
point.
think about it as a soccer match, and
Mm-hmm.
I wish I would have thought of this illustration. He thought of it. I'm just
Makes sense.
borrowing it from him. But if you and I coached soccer for a number of years, but if you watch international soccer, and the only one that knows um, how much time is left in the game is the referee,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
they take all those timeouts and excuse me, they add them to the end, and so we are now in overtime, and I honestly believe that, and there are hundreds of scriptures pointing to that fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe also that's part of the Lord exposing the evil too. You know, y-
Yes.
you see a lot of that. Amy, you know what? I'm disappointed in the church. A lot of the churches now, because a lot of this is not have being taught. I'm sure you're familiar with the 501c3 churches.
Yes.
I mean, the government
Yeah.
tells them what to do, what to say. And they proved that when they refused to stay. A lot of them just went along with the government and closed things down with the pandemic. I put that in air quotes. Um,
Plandemic.
yeah, the pandemic. Thank you.
Yeah.
Um, uh, and and they're saying, well, we're trying to protect our people, and God bless the ones that
Mm.
did fight for it. And some pastors were arrested. I never thought in a million years or whatever you would see this in America.
I
When
know.
that happened, but it woke my eyes up because we couldn't go to church. They closed our church down, so I started trying to find around online. Some of that was good. God brought good into that because there were some really good churches that were doing that, and to reach out to people. But it opened my eyes when I saw the other churches. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is really what they're teaching. It's a feel good moment. It's a pep rally. I did one of my shows. It was called An Altar or a Stage. Do they really have an altar, or is it
Mm,
just a stage where they have a band? You know what I'm saying? There's a
absolutely.
lot of
That's a
that in
good
there. And
illustration.
I think that God is going to expose the church too. You hear about the deep state. There's the deep church too. There's the deep church. And for me personally, and that's where I have to go to the Lord. It's really hard for me to find a church that I can trust right now. I mean, that's really Bible believing, speaking the truth. Um, you go to some churches, they don't even say in the name of Jesus. They don't preach
Mhm.
about sin. So a lot of this stuff, I think God is going to hold accountable for is the leaders in these churches. Would you not agree?
I absolutely 100% agree. And yes, we were at the point where we were just about ready to give up on organized church.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually have a chapter in the book uh, called the social injustice. And I talk about the social justice movement. And I kind of call out the churches in that, and because there
Mm-hmm.
are a number of churches who are actually marching with Black Lives Matter.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so the church in America has reached a point, and I'm sorry, I should back up. Not every church.
No, not everyone. No.
We have found a really good one where they preach the truth and they talk about
Mm-hmm.
sin and they talk about the
Mm-hmm.
coming of Jesus, and we're very pleased about that. Another level in Pittsburgh, and uh, but there have been a number of churches and a number of denominations which are siding with the social justice movement, and sometimes a it's they're deceived. It's not an actual, they don't even realize that they are making a political statement because, they just
Mm-hmm.
want to love everybody and they just want to
Mm-hmm. Don't want to
include
hurt the
everybody.
feelings. Don't want to hurt the feelings. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. But when you look at social justice, and actually, can I read a definition to you
Please.
that I found for social
Absolutely.
justice? And this is what kind of opened my eyes, because when I first started researching this, I thought, I don't even exactly know what social justice means. It turns out that nobody really does, and it's
Right.
intentionally vague. So bear with me a second as I
Sure.
pull
No
this
problem.
up. Uh, where am I here? Okay, so this is a definition that I found, and so social justice is a political and philosophical theory which asserts that there are dimensions to the concept of justice beyond those embodied in the principles of civil or criminal law, economic supply and demand, or traditional moral frameworks. Social justice tends to focus more on just relations between groups within society as opposed to justice of individual conduct or justice for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Historically and in theory, the idea of social justice is that all people should have equal access to health, wealth, well being, justice, privilege, and opportunity, regardless of their legal, political, economic, or other circumstances. In modern practice, social justice revolves around favoring or punishing different groups of the population, regardless of any given individual's choices or actions, based on value judgments regarding historical events, current conditions, or group relations. In economic terms, this often means redistribution of wealth, income, and economic opportunity from groups whom social justice advocates consider to be oppressors, compared to those who they consider to be the oppressed. Social justice, and this is directly from the definition, is often associated with identity politics, socialism, and revolutionary communism.
Yeah.
So I would encourage any pastors that are listening, to really understand what is happening with the social justice movement, that social justice in effect is anti-justice.
And that's where I get in, where it's the 501c3 churches that are teaching that, because the government is, basically telling them, some of those people, to read that stuff. And but yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's
Right.
that's definitely, that's part of the communist plan, and it's all about dividing. I mean, that's part of it too. That's how you get the
It is.
division. And it's, yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's, yeah,
Sure.
that is and it seems to be getting worse. Seems to be getting worse.
Well, we know from prophecy it's gonna get worse as the closer we get to the end.
Oh yeah.
And also, if I can read from Isaiah, the definition of true justice: learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's case. And so justice is not a philosophical idea. It is a measurement, and we have the tools to measure it. It is the Ten Commandments, and it is Scripture, and that's what true justice is. And I also talk in the chapter about how it's amazing to me, and one of the things that I saw, particularly around the election, and there was another pastor, and I can't think of who it was. I'll have to bring it up. That actually called out the churches right after the Republican National Convention, and he said, why is it that a political organization is talking about abortion, is talking about justice, is talking about uh, Jesus and truth more than the American churches. And that is just really sad. And what I
Mm.
believe God showed me is, because he's true to his word, revival is coming, and it's coming to America, and it's coming to the rest of the world, but it may not be coming through the churches.
Right, right. Oh, absolutely. I think we're going to see a different type of revival.
I think we are
You
too.
you may see the old tent revivals in the community. And I think a lot of new churches are going to be coming out. It's just my opinion.
Right?
That will be coming out of the homes, and starting. And I think these corrupt churches, God's going to, do with them. I think it'll be a whole different thing. I really do. Yeah, I
Mhm.
definitely believe there's going to be a revival coming. You know, I have some people that I know, what I call the doom and gloom Christians, where they're just saying like totally like, oh no, this is it, blah 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 blah. Like I shared with you, we just go by the signs. Either way, God wins, but don't tell me he's not in control. I mean, he loves America, and I pray to him. I said, Lord, if you can just delay this so we can get a lot more people saved, if you can just, give us, another opportunity, to turn this country around. So the main thing is to get the unsaved. And what breaks my heart, and I don't know if you've had this experience, maybe you do, with the pandemic. So many of my family members and friends just go right along with it, and they're the sheep, and they won't listen.
Yes.
They just won't listen, and but we got some small wins there from God, with the court ruling
Mhm.
for the employers. So praise for that. That's all we can do. Just keep praying for the little victories, and I think we'll get it. I think we'll get there. But it just
I
breaks my heart.
agree. Yes, and my husband and I talk about that all the time. It is heartbreaking, and I think that's a sign of the end too. That
Hmm.
Bible
Deceitful.
talks about the veils that
Hmm.
are over their eyes, and there's a lot of deception.
But I didn't think it would
And
be. I didn't think it would be close friends and family. I just wasn't
yeah,
expecting that. It's just like, wow, you never thought that way before. What? But there's no talking to them. There's none. There's none. There's no convincing them. There's it's just, you just got to let them find out for themselves, and you just pray for them. That's all you can do.
right, right. And the parable of the bridesmaids in the book of John, and this is fascinating, and I didn't realize this until recently. But if you remember the story, it's about the 10 bridesmaids, and they had one job. Their job was to wait for the bridegroom, and half of them were ready and half of them weren't, and they had to go out into the city and get oil. And many believe that particular parable is talking to the fact that as much as 50% of the church is going to be deceived in the
Hmm.
end of times, and they are not going to be waiting. And it goes along with the scripture that says, Lord, Lord, did we not cast out demons? Did we not heal and raise the dead? And that scripture terrifies me of
Mm-hmm.
all of them, because you're not talking about a casual understanding of the Lord. But I just heard it said this way too. Christianity, God is the only employer that can fire you and let you keep doing the work or the
Right.
job. So there are a lot
Right.
of people that are operating, as servants of the Lord and in capacities, but they've lost the connection to the Holy Spirit.
Yes. Yes, they have. And I think that's part of two things. That's probably the church, the way they're not, telling you what they should be. And it's just, again, the veil over their eyes. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's, I'm just, I'm not surprised because the Lord said this was going to happen, but yet, I guess, just being human, I am, it just,
Right.
it
But we
just,
never thought it would happen in our lifetime. I
no,
never thought that.
no, no.
And I remember when I first, being in high school, and, you know, my first time being involved in the church and hearing about the end times, and that
Hmm.
there would be persecution of believers. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not going to happen in America.
Hmm. Hmm.
And,
I think America got it has a lot to do with the end times. more than we realize. It's
Yeah. Well, yeah, yes and no. I agree with you because we
hmm
are, well, we were
were,
the world superpower.
yep,
There's not a lot of mention of us. Um, there's, some faint references to the horn.
hmm hmm
Uh, so I don't know what to make of all that.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
but like you said, or I think I heard in your last podcast, we will not be here.
right,
So that
yeah,
is the promise.
yeah.
And
But it bugs me, the ones that will be left here, and that
absolutely,
have this hardened heart. I have family members that have this hard heart. They're not going to listen, and God tells us some people are going to be that way. They're just going to, it's going to stay that way. But especially when it's family members, close friends, and it's just like, if only you realize what is going to happen after the church is gone. That's when the devil has a play day, and and
absolutely,
it's
absolutely.
it's going to be absolutely horrible, and I was talking about like the Antichrist, is he around or is he not? I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but the signs that have things set up for him, it's certainly looking like it is, that it's coming close, but it's just so overwhelming. I guess because we don't understand, we're too small and God's too big, and it's just hard for us. And that's when you go in His Word and ask Him to help you understand everything and give you peace and just keep marching on. He tells us to keep fighting, tells us to keep running the race. You're talking about, we just a little while ago about the trophy. Well, God told us to win the prize, did He not? He didn't say
Absolutely.
the hey, I'm just going to give you something just because you're around or you participated or whatever. But yeah, it's
Right.
it is
Play
it
to
is
win.
yeah, absolutely. Play to win. I always visualize this when we're doing this, and I mean, maybe our fellow loved ones and believers that are up there with Him, and they're like in an arena, and we're playing a game. Maybe it would be football, soccer, whatever, and they're rooting for us for this victory. And they're telling us to run this
Mm,
race. They're cheering us on, and to me, that's encouraging. It's encouraging for me personally.
absolutely.
But yeah. So since we're talking about the bad things that are happening, you have a topic here. Why do bad things happen, Amy? Why
Mm,
why do bad things happen? Everybody always says that. If God is so good, why does He let these bad things
right.
happen? And in my past life, I've asked that, but I learned a lot personally, and it's called sin, and the enemy is the ruler of the world right now. So a lot of that stuff does happen because of that. Would you? Am I kind of on the right track there?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I break it down to three or four root causes of why bad things happen. And the first is just our own dumb choices, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's consequences. So if I eat too much, I'm overweight, my blood sugar goes through the roof, I'm dealing with health issues. If I drive too fast, which, yeah, uh, I endanger others and I can get a ticket and those type of things. So that's probably our biggest issue for why bad things happen is we do bring them on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that is not the only reason. And like you alluded to, another reason is that we live uh, we're still imperfect and we live in the evil world and there is a battle between good and evil.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's some tragedies that we just can't explain, we can't understand, we will never understand
It's
this
too big.
side of
Yeah.
heaven. So
Yeah.
I have a really good friend, her name is Tammy, who lost both of her children.
Mm-hmm.
One died at the age of 2, and then her daughter died at the age of 17 in a car accident. And you say,
Mm-hmm.
what what in the world?
What's the
That's
purpose? Yeah.
what's the purpose?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but she's actually a very remarkable woman. And one of the things, so I helped her write her book, and that was the first one that I ever assisted on aside from my own. It's called Hope Out of Heartbreak. And I'm sorry, the title of the book is Homecoming, Hope Out of
Mm-hmm.
Heartbreak. And so about Alexis Summers. And so what's remarkable about Tammy is that she is one of the healthiest, most well-adjusted people I know, and has a heart for ministry. And uh, I won't give away the book, but talks about the fact that, our pain can become our platform. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that we miss when we wonder why bad things happen. And another reason, and I touch on this in the book, is sometimes it's our perception of what is good and what is bad. And let me give you an
Mm-hmm.
example. So normally most people would say, if you'd say, is winning the lottery good or bad? What do you think most people would
Mm-hmm.
say?
Well, probably good because they think they get that money, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Do you know there have been studies that came out that showed that the quality of life 10 years after winning the lottery is lower than that of a
Mm-hmm.
paraplegic?
Yeah. I hear those people are miserable. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. So sometimes we ascribe value to things that really are not good for us and that are
Mm-hmm.
detrimental to our health and well-being. And so, on the other side of that, for example, the car accident or the death of a child, or just these traumatic things that we would see as, you know, the death of the end of our existence. Sometimes those are the things that can bring about healing and bring you closer to the Lord and give you purpose that you don't have otherwise. Now, of
Mm-hmm.
course, none of us ever says, "Oh, I hope my plane crashes today," or "I hope
Right.
my
Right.
husband cheats on me," or these things. That's
Mm-hmm. Well,
none
that's
of
where
us
God.
ask
That's
for
where
that.
God turns bad into good. He turns it into good.
Exactly,
You know.
exactly. And there's
It
a
may take
great
a while. It may take a while because He's waiting on us to heal. And however long it takes. And but yeah, that's what I think. And me personally, I lost a brother when he was 20 years old back in 1981. So with my family, with some of the family members and my mom and myself, you grow angry at God as well. That can,
right,
the enemy can use that to grow angry. You can get angry at God. Look what he did, blah, blah, blah. And that's something that takes gradual healing as well,
does.
yeah, we don't understand why that happened. We don't have a clue why that happened, and one of my uh shows I did about, how do you comfort people who lost a loved one, and the people that never experienced it, they don't mean to, but they say some really foolish things, like, it's like, well, why well, God needed him. No, he didn't. God doesn't need anything, and that kind of thing, it, it's it's just a real hard pill to swallow. But you're so right about that. It's we don't know why, and we never will. And maybe we'll get the answer when we go to heaven. But I don't know about you. I probably won't care then anyway. So it's
Right,
you're gonna be with them. So
right.
but I think it's all about trusting and, like you said, building a relationship with Him. He turns that good into. I mean, he turns that bad into good.
Absolutely. And along those same lines, another thing that we don't often understand is why we need to fail. I don't know about
Mhm.
you, but I hate to fail. I
Absolutely.
hate to make mistakes. I hate to do stupid things. And yet, that is what really kind of opens the box for us to experience success.
Mhm.
And so in the book, I also talk about, I have a whole list of first round draft picks for the NFL.
Mhm.
Do you know that in in our boy, just forgot his name from Cleveland. Watched the game yesterday. The quarterback, he's a first round draft pick, so he's not in this category. But many of them did not succeed at all,
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and which is remarkable because they were the ones that were told that you can write your own ticket. There's no way you're not going to succeed. They were the cream of the crop, and yet what that shows is that uh, it's actually the failures that do more for your success than the successes. And so, and we've seen this also with actors and with athletes. When they experience too much success early on, it's hard to sustain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
It's
so
hard. It's hard for
that's
them to.
why.
It's hard for them to accept failure when it happens. I'm sure.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's why late bloomers like myself tend to do
Um.
better, because you learn from
Mm-hmm.
those mistakes
Mm-hmm.
and from the failure. And actually, the failure can open more doors and more pathways to success. And
Absolutely.
there's a great quote that talks about one sees great things from the valley and only small things from the peak.
Mm-hmm.
C.K.
Mm-hmm.
Chesterton.
Mm-hmm.
He was a Catholic theologian in, I believe, the 17th century. But it's so true. And so
Yeah.
that goes along too with why bad things happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think also God is. You may not see it right then, but He's preparing you probably for a mission later on in your life. When you go through something bad, that's part of your training, because you could help someone else. You can help someone else with it. They may experience the same thing that you did, whether it be death, loss of a job.
Exactly.
You can grieve losing. I've lost jobs. You can lose. I mean, you can literally be grieving over losing your job. It's a very scary thing. So I think God uses that as a training thing for us. So if you can't experience something bad, how are you going to know to help someone that is going through that? I mean, it's, to me, that just makes sense. Unfortunately,
Mhm.
yeah, it's going to be painful, but I mean, I've tried to help a lot of people out with the things that I've gone through. It, I think that's one reason why bad things happen, but not only just because of the sin, but it's just the good thing is, like, we're not supposed to be part of the world. We're just here, so you know, you know, but
Exactly.
but you know, but yeah, and that's a very good point, Amy. I appreciate you telling us about that. But so what about unmasking the truth with the immoral, bankrupt culture? That's a big one.
Okay. Yeah.
That's a big
Yeah.
one.
So these were a series of blog posts. So I started out I writing when I call them Wednesday Wisdoms. So it's just a one-page blog post that goes out every Wednesday. And at the end of the year, I gathered them together and put them into a book. So I like it. I really, it challenged me from the writing aspect, because it's much harder to start a topic and have to wrap it up in 1 or 2 pages,
Mm-hmm.
because you really have to pull it together. So I talk a lot of different things, and I actually have a series of 4 posts that are in that book, Unmasking the Truth, talking about wealth and poverty. So, like when we were talking about socialism and talking about what the Bible says as the formula, if you will, for building wealth. And a lot of people say, oh, that's it's not part of the prosperity gospel. There are actually more verses that talk about how to handle money than about heaven and hell combined. Did you know that?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't
Mm-hmm.
realize that.
Mm.
So
Very interesting. And people
very
misquote with the one verse. They leave out the word for the love of money, don't they? They leave that part out.
they do.
They say money is just money in general is for the root of all evil. No, he says the love of money is, that's a big difference.
Exactly. And I think you mentioned this earlier. There's two opposing worldviews when it comes to money in the Bible. And the one is the prosperity gospel, and the other is the poverty gospel.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, and neither one of those are dead on. That's why there's a lot of information about money and about how to build wealth. It's not quite as simple as that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's a great verse that says that I, the Lord your God, give you the ability to build wealth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
He doesn't. And I'm sure he doesn't mean you just sit there and expect something to happen. You have to do your part, seek him where he wants you to go, and he'll
Exactly.
he
And
will help.
yes, and so one of the keys is to uh, you have to work for it to build your own wealth. Oops, I think we're having
Yeah.
connection problems.
Yeah. Are you there now?
I am. I'm
see,
sorry. That's
see,
probably
see
on my side.
no, no, no. I think it was both of us. I think the enemy is Amy.
Oh, that could be. Definitely.
Oh man. Yeah. So what were we saying now? Now I forgot.
Just one of the keys to building wealth that talks about in scripture is that you have to work for it. That
Yes.
God has given you the ability. But yes, it's
He doesn't want us sitting on our hands and doing,
right.
Yeah, absolutely. And it should be you should feel joyful when you're doing it, it's when you go to work and a lot of works they're pardon my language, they suck. Yeah. And it's hard to deal with, but God tells us you're not working for them, you're working for me. If you look at it that way,
Yeah, exactly. Oops. I think we.
you
Oh, you there? Yeah, bear with us. Having some connection issues.
okay. But yeah,
Uh,
it's if we just work, I know that we have a victory in that, no doubt about it. I apologize about the connection, but I don't know. I guess the enemy doesn't like us talking about this. Too bad.
yeah, right on.
Too bad. Oh man. Amy, there's another thing I'd like to discuss if we can, if hopefully we won't get disconnected, but it's important to me personally because I've experienced this and I shared this with you with fear and anxiety.
Yes.
I don't know a lot of people, friends and family who have every day. How do what do you say to a believer or a non-believer?
As far as dealing with anxiety. So, yes, in my book, you can visit, but you can't live there. Keys to living free from fear, anxiety, and guilt. So, we talk about building resilience. And so, building resiliency is the idea that it doesn't matter what we start with, it doesn't matter what we go through, that we have the ability to make choices that are not dependent on our circumstances. And so sometimes the harder our circumstances are, the more resiliency we're able to build. And so, from the anxiety perspective, uh, it changes the way that we process information. And so, for example, one of the things I talk about is uh, you can have two individuals and you can't tell initially who is resilient and who isn't because they can have the same reactions initially. So, for example, in the book, I give a story of uh, two two guys in high school, both going out for the football team. And they work really hard all summer. They, they do well in the tryouts, and neither one makes the team. Well, so both of them, I'm sure, as they leave the locker room, they slam the lockers. They, may have choice words for the coaches. They may be really annoyed.
Mm-hmm.
Come home, slam the door, go to their room, and don't, don't want dinner that night. But what happens the next couple days is what really differentiates you and shows resilience is the one kid stays in his room. He posts nasty things on social media, and just he becomes very angry. But the other one,
Mm-hmm.
he takes some time, processes it, and goes figures out how he can make the team next time. And he goes to the game that Friday night, and sometimes it's a matter of he has to find a whole new set of friends because all of his friends are on the field.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the difference between someone who's resilient and who isn't. And in the book I talk about different ways. When you say specifically about anxiety, different ways to process anxiety, and a lot of it has to do with perspective, and just uh, what's important to us. And there's a chapter in there specifically about fear, and I go through steps on how to evaluate whether fear is rational or irrational.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with rational fear is uh, rational fear is a God-given emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Fear serves a purpose in the human experience because it prevents us from doing anything stupid. For
Mm-hmm.
example, uh, if I should be afraid of driving over 100 miles an hour. I mean, that's a legitimate fear. I should be afraid of taking a bath with the hair dryer. That's a rational fear. But then there can be a very fine line between rational and irrational fear. And the problem with irrational fear is that it can actually render us helpless, and it can prevent us from doing anything useful. And I talk in the book too about so my dad was one that learned to ride a motorcycle when he was 50, and especially as he got older, he took a lot of risks
Mm-hmm.
uh, with his body. And what we learned is that he was more afraid of getting old than he was of actually dying.
Mm-hmm.
So what you're afraid of affects what you do, and how you act. And so, but growing up with that, we were taught not to be afraid of too much, and I'm very grateful. My husband and I both kind of bought into that idea, and we have kids. So we have our older two kids. One is active duty Air Force, the other is Air National Guard, and she and her husband are both uh, police officers in our local city.
Mm-hmm.
And the youngest is looking to possibly go into the Navy. We're kind of waiting to see. Everything's a little crazy right now. But I realized at one point, because they both have done several deployments, and I know you talked about it earlier, that our schools are just crazy, and they're not safe. So
Mm-hmm.
I knew that my kids were safer on military bases in the Middle East than they were at college.
Yeah,
That's
that's
how I felt
crazy.
personally.
Mm.
And so that's a perspective thing too, because everyone would say, "Oh my goodness, aren't you afraid? Your kids are in the military. They're in the serving as police officers." And but I've also learned that the safest place to be is in the center of God's will, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
where that is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's good fear and bad fear. The bad fear of me is like not trusting God. If you're so afraid. I mean, He tells us not to be afraid, and the good fear is, like you said, to protect us.
Right.
But absolutely. Well, that's a great point, and hopefully that'll help people out. At the end of the show here, I'm going to have you share where to get all your books because you have several of them. Because I know a lot of people are going to want to tune into that, so we'll make sure that we do
Awesome.
that as well. So, what about the pursuit of liberty and protecting our God-given rights? Well, that's going on right now, isn't it? I mean,
It
especially
really
in the
is.
church as Christians, they're really attacking the Christian people right now. What we saw during the pandemic by shutting down the churches and so forth. You know.
Right. So yes, if I can show you that book, I got that right here.
Yeah,
So this
absolutely.
one, so the first book, well, the second book really, the Through the Lens of Love and Truth, I started with the Biblical Worldview, and I really got into the political chapters. Like, it was right before the election, and I didn't even realize it had kind of morphed into that. So, but after I released that book and realized that I couldn't even get my family to read it, I decided to republish it and rebrand it, if you will, into the Pursuit of Liberty, because it does kind of address a little more of what we're going through. So, in this book, I talk about the frailty of freedom and the idea, the separation of church and state debate, and that's often misunderstood. So I kind of break that down and talk about that in detail, and then talk about protecting the traditional family and the rights of life, which talks about the abortion debate that's going on. There's a lot of gray area in scripture, but defending human life is not one of them.
Right.
So
Right.
we break that down and talk about socialism, capitalism. I even go into a chapter on race, which at the time I was writing this, I said, Lord, seriously? You want a middle-aged white woman who lives in rural Pennsylvania to talk about race and race issues? But what I found as I got into the research is I looked at all the legal, what had happened over the past century. And really, if you look at it, the Democrats always had a plan to keep minorities enslaved.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
after slavery, they came up with segregation, and when segregation didn't work, LBJ came out with the Great Society legislation that, and if you want to look at what they're really trying to do, look at the opposite of what they name it, because that's what brought in the welfare state. And then Reagan called out that and said that this is going to create poverty and hopelessness like never before. And it's going to create two separate Americas. And it's exactly what, and it was exactly their plan. And if that wasn't enough, then we see the 1994 crime bill, which is a whole nother level of evil. And that, of course, was authored by Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And that actually created incentives for communities, cities to keep people in prison longer. So it was never about reform.
No.
And the longer they kept them in, then money was guaranteed to them to build new jails.
I
But the
think the
other thing,
minorities. I think the minority people are waking up now, though, about all that. I really do think they
they
see.
really are.
Yeah.
They
That's
really are.
yeah.
And I think President Trump helped to expose a lot of that and what was really happening. And
Absolutely.
and to empower minority communities, there was money flowing to minority communities to build businesses like never ever before. And it's really frightening and terrible what's happening to our cities again, because they were making great progress.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. Yeah, and now they're trying to reverse all that and put it back to where they want it to be. But we'll just pray that. I always pray now, Lord, what the enemy's trying to do, let his plans fail before. Let it fail ahead. Do not let it go forward. So that's the greatest weapon we have now is prayer.
Exactly. And what's amazing is it always was,
Right.
but
Right.
prosperity has a way of concealing what
Yeah.
really is the truth and what really matters. And so all of that's kind of being stripped away, even here in America. And we're getting back to the basics and realize that God is the only one who can protect us, who can save us, who can provide for us. And yeah,
And he will.
that's where it's
He
at.
will.
He
He will.
will.
He
Absolutely.
he has promised us that It's just us, trusting him and believing in him. I mean, I always look back, when I go through like the anxiety thing and fear thing, and I always remind myself, and I think God reminds me, like, well, look what I did for you before. Look how I got you out of that before. Look at this, and
Exactly.
I mean, I suffered a brain aneurysm in 2006. I was supposed to be
I
dead,
read
but
that. Yeah,
and I mean, so if I look at stuff like that, that really helps me, and I'm like, this is not important. It's going to work out.
sure.
And it always does. Yeah, it may be a battle. Yeah, but
Right.
I know that God is the leader in that battle, and he sends people to help you too when you're going through a trial. I mean, he sends, his
Exactly.
people to help. We just have to ask.
Right. And if I could add one other quick point to the anxiety topic,
Sure.
uh, a key is you have to learn, and I had to learn how to talk back to myself
Mm.
because a lot of things that come into our mind, and that's why we need to be renewing our mind through the scripture because there are a lot of things that come at us that are not truth. And
Mm.
so I think one way that we can deal with anxiety is, and what you said, and you said that you do this, is you have to stop and say, okay, wait a minute. It's kind of like play a game,
Mm.
where's the lie? Find the
Mhm.
lie in
Mhm.
this. And you talk back and you say, wait a minute, I can't buy into this fear and this black cloud that's trying to come over me
That's the enemy.
because
Yeah.
exactly, and
Mhm.
because, God has protected me in the past, this is what's happening. Uh, you know, Being born in America by itself is like winning the lottery, and
Oh,
so
and we take that for granted, don't
we
we?
take it so for
Mm.
granted. Absolutely.
That's why you hear all these legal people that came over. I'm saying legal that came over here and worked so hard, and they see what's happening to our nation now. They're so heartbroken, and they're saying like, "What? Don't you guys see? This is what we got
Yeah, don't you
away
get it?
from." Yeah,
Exactly. I have a lot of friends, a lot of immigrant friends, and they are some of the most hardworking people because they don't take it for granted. So
right.
you know, they were uh, drafted players. They weren't,
Mm-hmm.
part of the original lineup, and they get it. They
Yep.
appreciate the opportunities.
Oh, absolutely. And then I think that they are hurt and upset, and they see the people coming in here illegally.
Yes, they are.
They don't want that. Do the right thing. I think it's great if you come over here if you do it legally. Welcome. God bless you.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's I believe there's hope. I really do. I'm not giving up yet. I mean, it's however the outcome is, whether whatever God decides, He's in control, and we're
Absolutely.
protected, and we're gonna win. There's no question about that.
Amen.
You also, is this another book too? You talk about Christian conservatism in America.
Yes, so that's through the lens of love and truth.
Okay.
So that one, that has all the information. So a lot of the chapters from the Liberty book are also in here. But I start out by talking about the about creationism and how it's actually better science than is evolution. So, and this was really created as a resource to be able to defend the things that we know to be true. But I give a lot of historical arguments and legal arguments. Like I said, some of the legislation and the pathways and how we got to where we are. And then also the biblical worldview of, you know, why we support certain views and certain
Mm-hmm.
positions. And so
Mm-hmm.
I talk about that. The chapter on why bad things happen is in here. Also, uh, do all religions lead to heaven? There's a chapter in there on
Mm.
that too. And so I hear a lot of people saying, oh, all religions are the same, all gods are the same. That should be an indication to you that those individuals have never studied world
Yep.
religions.
Absolutely.
So I'm hoping that that book will be a resource for people to be able
Sure.
to look up information to develop an argument so that you can defend yourself.
Sure.
And, scripture says that we should always have a reason for the hope that we have. And also the chapter on why the bad things happen. And then it gets into, more the political, such as the abortion debate. And I talk about transgenderism in there. But there's also a chapter at the very end that isn't in any other book. And it's called What in the World? And it talks about biblical prophecies in the end times. And, mostly it discusses Israel's part in the end times and what's happening in Israel and what's happening in the Middle East right now and how that is really setting up for the return of the Lord.
Yeah. Keep your eye on Israel. That is for sure. Keep your eye on Israel.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. We went through a lot today because you have so much great stuff. I mean, great books. Are you gonna? Is there another one coming out in the near future, or you have something in mind, or?
Yes. So the one I'm working on, and I just had mentioned it briefly, but it's probably going to be called "Would God Really Send People to Hell?"
Okay.
And so that's the one I'm working on right now, and I'm collaborating with a couple pastor friends because I want to make this a resource that churches and ministries can use, and that you can have available. It's just going to be a little booklet, so
That's
that
great. Like a little
something you can
footnote
stick in
type
your.
book. You can just look it up. That's cool.
Yes, in
Yeah.
fact, if I could show you, I have. So this is why the bad things happen is in a book. So it's going to be this size. It's
Nice.
nice and small.
Nice. And where can people find your books? You have is it on your Fusion page or where can they find that?
There is a link, but if you go to www.amytravisunlimited.com, that has a listing of all my books, and they're all available on Amazon as well. So if you look up
Fantastic.
Amy L. Travis,
So they can get it on
available
Kindle
there.
if they want. They can get it on Kindle as well.
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yes.
awesome. Well,
Yes.
I just want to thank you
Okay.
so much for coming on today. When I read
Certainly.
about you, I
Thank
think
you.
you
I
have
appreciate that.
you have such a great mission. God is using you, no doubt. He's not finished with you, and really, God bless you. And I met a new friend today, and that's just awesome. I get so excited when I meet someone special. And Amy, please come back on anytime. If you have,
I will. Thank you
you know,
so much for having me. I really
oh, of course.
appreciate the
Oh,
time and
no problem.
yes,
Your
great.
time is
I know.
valuable. I'm fine. Your time is valuable, and I really do appreciate it. Don't hang up on me yet,
Okay.
because I want to talk to you afterwards. But
Sure.
we'll tell the folks goodbye here, and I'll get right back with you. Thank you again. All right, guys, we enjoyed Amy so much. Thank her so much for being on the show. We'll see you next time. You all have a great one. God bless you.